Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to cover trends in electronic and dance music by taking a look at some of the most popular songs so far this year. If you like that idea, then check out the video description below for a link to a similar analysis that I did of pop songs from the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Here's the game plan for the video. First up, I'm going to talk about the data set and how I analyze those songs. Second, I'm going to talk about the high-level macro insights and trends that I've spotted. Third, I'm going to talk about outliers, songs that really stand out and why. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about some interesting observations that I want to highlight. Let's get into it. For the dataset, I used the Billboard Dance/Electronic chart for the week ending March 22nd, 2025. I used the site Qobuz, where I was able to download lossless versions of the songs and load them into iZotope RX11. In RX11, I used the waveform stats and spectrum modules to be able to analyze the music. When listening, I was in this control room, listening on Neumann KH420 midfields, and I also listened on a pair of Audeze MM500 planar magnetic headphones, which is a little serendipitous because those headphones were created in partnership with and tuned by the mixer Manny Marroquin. And Marshmello actually had two songs mixed by Manny that were on the chart, including the #1 position, Miles on It, which is a collaboration with the country artist Kane Brown. Now, in my last analysis, I focused a bit more on mastering trends and got into the numbers like loudness and peak levels. But this time through, I want to focus a bit more on mixing and production techniques and trends that I think you might be interested in. The first trend that I spotted was that many of these popular artists are releasing 3 or 4 alternate versions of their songs at different tempos, sped up, slowed down, super slowed down, ultra slowed down, and some that even have a ton of reverb added to it. It's really wild to listen to these, and I suggest that you check out these alternate versions so you can hear for yourself. Note that when these tempo shifts are happening, there's a corresponding pitch shift, meaning they're not just time stretching the songs, which is kind of an artifacty way to do it, but they're actually using a pitch shifting algorithm, just like switching the speed on a turntable, which will produce a higher fidelity result. Now, this sped up and slowed down version is something that Ian Stewart on our team also noticed in his Mastering Trends in 2024 article. And he actually analyzed the degrees of the tempo shifts. He found that the sped up versions ranged anywhere from 110 to 120% of the original, while the slowed down versions were anywhere from 91
to 70% of original tempo.
One possible theory about where this is coming from is that it's being driven by TikTok and IG Reels, where it's commonplace for video creators to take versions of these songs, put them underneath their videos, and speed them up or slow them down in the editor. That could be creating enough of an appetite for end listeners where artists are just releasing these versions on their own. Now, if you want to play around with this technique and release different versions of your own song that are pitch shifted, sped up, and slowed down, it's easy to do this in iZotope RX. You can load your song into RX and then load the variable pitch module, enter a pitch shift in the first node, and then enter the same pitch shift in the final node. Make sure that preserve time is not checked so you actually get a tempo shift, and then click render. Here's the slowed version. And here's the original. In terms of loudness, the songs in the electronic and dance genres were substantially louder than other genres that I've analyzed. For the full song integrated LUFS, the median value was -7.8 in this dataset. You can contrast that with the pop chart, which was -8.1. What's more is that the loudest songs on this chart were way louder by a huge margin than the loudest songs on the pop chart. The loudest song in this dataset was Funk Do Bounce by Aries, which was -2.3 LUFS integrated over the full song, and it peaked at -0.6 short-term LUFS. You can contrast that with the loudest song on the pop chart, which was Abracadabra by Lady Gaga, which was -6.3 LUFS integrated, peaking at -4.4 short-term LUFS. Hand in hand with those big loudness numbers is a lot of saturation and distortion on the master. And I think that there is a trend towards an increasing tolerance for, or maybe even appetite for, saturation and distortion amongst listeners. Several of the songs in popular positions in this dataset were hugely distorted, so much so that I can only imagine that it's being done as a creative aesthetic choice very intentionally. It's so in your face. It sounds to me like these artists are pushing their masters really hard into broadband saturation or soft clipping. It's It's possible they might be using a limiter, but they'd have to be using settings so fast that the limiter was causing wave shaping distortion. A good example of this is the song Nunca Muda by Cythermain and Night. If you listen to that song, the whole song has this really, really buzzy distortion to the whole song. Every kick, every bass, all the elements all throughout the frequency spectrum, everything is heavily, heavily saturated. But there's an exposed section at 47 seconds where you can hear a sub drop. Normally through a limiter, this would be fairly clean, but you can hear this big crunch to it, which to me indicates that it's most likely going to be soft clipping. Soft clippers don't flex like limiters, and they don't handle bass very well. So when you overload a soft clipper, it's going to crunch. And that is pretty much the sound of this entire song. Here's an example of a limiter versus a soft clipper. The limiter is mostly clean and handles bass well with slower settings. Faster settings will dig into the bass waveform, causing distortion. Up top is the pre-limited signal, and the bottom is the signal after fast limiting. Now let's check out a clipper. With clipping, there's instant wave shaping, and bass causes crunchy saturation. The top is the unprocessed signal, and the bottom is after aggressive soft clipping. I'm speculating here, but if I had to venture a guess, I'd say, again, this could be in part due to TikTok and Instagram Reels, where creators are using the video editors to add music, and perhaps just pushing up gain to the point where it's digitally clipping and creating an environment where this is so commonplace that listeners have accepted it as normal. I think it also is definitely being driven by artists like Cythermain and Aries that are using this level of loudness and the limiting and saturation and distortion as a sound in the new and very popular emerging genre of funk. More on that in a sec. In terms of peak levels, I noticed that a lot of the songs in the dataset actually had no limiter margin at all. The sample peak level went right up to 0 dBFS. 7 of the 25 songs had 0 dBFS as the peak level. The median was negative 0.2, so the majority of the mastering engineers are leaving a little bit of room. But I think if I had to speculate, I'd say that these dance and electronic songs are maybe being engineered in a way that they're a bit more oriented towards DJ set play, where they would be in lossless formats and you really don't need that margin, versus orienting them more to leave headroom for compression noise from lossy formats that would be used on streaming sites like Spotify. Stylistically, in terms of songwriting, I wanted to point out something about short-term LUFS. I always take a look at where the short-term LUFS highest reading happens in a song. And in the pop songs I analyzed last time, it was common to see the highest short-term LUFS reading in the final chorus. Kind of makes sense. The songwriting is usually oriented in such a way that the final chorus is bigger than anything else. You go out with a bang. But in electronic and dance music, that doesn't happen. Usually the highest short-term LUFS reading happens in the drop, and then it's the exact same or very close in the final drop. There isn't a lot of variation in the peak short-term LUFS from the drop to drop. You can, of course, find examples of electronic and dance music that's been written more like pop songs with a bigger final drop, but I'm just speaking in terms of generalities here. One song that stood out to me is Forever Young by David Guetta, Alphaville, and Ava Max. It is an exemplification of what's possible in terms of cleanliness and an epic song when your sound design, songwriting, production, and engineering techniques are all on point and working together in perfect harmony. In the vocal, the sibilants and breaths are nicely controlled. In the mix, the resonances are really nicely dialed and you're not hearing anything jump out at you. The song is big and lush and huge sounding, but also tight and punchy. And it makes me think about how they might have achieved that in the production and in the mix. And I think what's happening is that the big time-based spatial effects, which have the capacity to wash out and mask other elements, I think those are being bussed together, and likely that those are being ducked to the drums. That's how the drums are remaining so punchy. I think the same thing is happening with all of the big mid synths and other instrumentation in the song. I think those are being bussed together and that those are being ducked to the drums, but it retains its width. I'm going to speculate here, but I think that what's happening potentially is that there is mid-channel specific ducking that's happening in particular frequency ranges that are masking with the drums. And if you want to try this technique out for yourself, there's a way that you can do that in iZotope Neutron 5's equalizer. So what you do is make sure that all of your mid-range instruments and time-based spatial effects are bussed together into one group. Then place Neutron 5's equalizer on that group. Route your kick or your drums into the external audio sidechain, then change it from stereo to mid-side mode. Add an EQ node where your drums are dominant and frequency masking is happening. Then expand the dynamic and sidechain controls. Set the node to be dynamic and have it listen to the external audio sidechain. Then adjust the threshold and dynamic processing to make space for your drums in the mid channel while leaving the side channel untouched. You can use Neutron Unmask for more advanced spectral ducking. Route audio into the sidechain, in this case, the snares and claps submix. Set Neutron to mid-side mode. And then dial in the mid-channel spectral ducking amount. To make it a bit more transparent, you can restrict the frequency range of the effect. This can be very transparent when used tastefully. I was surprised to see that both of the David Guetta songs in the dataset, Beautiful People and Forever Young, were mastered to exactly -7.7 LUFS integrated over the full song. Upon further investigation, I found out that they were both mixed and mastered by Timofey Reznikov, so it seems like he's working with the same engineer across his music. And it makes kind of sense to me that an engineer would be referencing the previous material they've done for the artist, but especially so in electronic and dance music where these songs might be played back-to-back in a DJ set. You would want to make sure that there's consistency there. I want to spend a minute on the artist Cythermain. He had 2 songs on the charts, and they were 2 of the loudest songs. Nunca Muda at -4.9 LUFS integrated, and Funk de Beleza at -2.7 LUFS integrated. These songs stand out in more ways than just loudness, though. Also because of their characteristic use of clipping, this over-the-top use of in-your-face clipping and distortion on the master that's also very commonplace in the emerging genre of funk. To give you an idea of how popular the funk genre is, I can talk about some stats from Cythermain's socials and streams. He has 12 million monthly streamers on Spotify. His YouTube channel is really interesting to take a look at. 70,000 of his channel's 140,000 subscribers joined in the last 30 days alone, just in the last month. And then of his channel's 102 million lifetime views, 49.6 million of those views were in the last 30 days. And in the last 30 days, he's only published 1 video. I think we can safely say that this is the definition of blowing up. If you haven't listened to funk songs yet, give it a whirl. It might not be your cup of tea. It's not really my cup of tea, but it is an interesting phenomenon to pay attention to. I've always been a fan of Dom Dolla, and his song Dreamin' is in position 12 on the chart. Spectrally, the mix is a little bit dark, but in a good way where you can turn it up loud and the high frequencies don't grate on your ears. It also packs a punch in the bass department. This song was mixed by the artist, which is typical in a lot of electronic and dance music songs because the mix can be kind of part of the signature sound, and it's mastered by Wayne Sunderland. Interestingly, it's -7.7 LUFS integrated across the full song, the exact same number as the 2 David Guetta songs. Do you think that's a coincidence? The way that he's getting such a big and dominating bass while being that loud and clean at the same time is with programming and with arrangement. If you listen to the very bottom end, there's a kick with a really long decay, or it could be a short kick that is being summed with a sub that has that decay, and the sub is being knocked out of the way with ducking to the short kick, and they're being merged together in a way that they're perceived. No way to know for sure, but it's this really nice sub-frequency pulsating on the quarter note with that kick with the long decay. And then just slightly on top of that, there is a syncopated pattern that is sitting in the upper bass to low mid-range, so it's not conflicting with frequency, and also it's not conflicting with the rhythmic programming. It's playing a syncopated offbeat pattern where it's not happening at the same time as the kick, so you're not getting summing of those frequencies, and it works just really well together. Both of the elements have their timing and space to be able to breathe, and when they are summing together in the low end of the track, they create a really loud and beautiful groove. The last song that I want to talk about is Focus by John Summit, which was position 15 on the chart. It has a quieter intro leading into a huge drop, which makes for a massive impression when the song kicks in. This song really threads the needle for me in terms of the production and the engineering. It's very loud at -7 LUFS integrated, but it's also punchy and wide and clean and spacious. And in particular, it has weight and girth in the low end, which is oftentimes the first thing you sacrifice for loudness. If you give it a listen, pay attention to how short and tight the drums are. There's no spilly tails, there's not a lot of sustain. I expect that either the drum sounds were designed or chosen for that characteristic, or that some really well-controlled transient shaping is happening in the mix, which is curtailing the drum envelopes and giving them that really short, punchy sound. The low end of this track is also quite clean, actually. There's no congestion in the low mids, there's not a lot of saturation in the bottom end. I think that this song is engineered really well for PA and club play. And if you're gonna get this type of clarity and this type of loudness to coexist with some weight in the low end, it all needs to start from the beginning, right from the production stage. That's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching this video. We'd love to hear from you about any trends that you've been spotting. Reach out in the comments below and let us know. And I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.